Nadia Al-Karim had seen it all. As CEO of a rising tech company, she had weathered countless storms, economic downturns, cutthroat competition, and the constant pressure to outdo herself. Her life had been a series of challenges and triumphs, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare her for the shock she faced that fateful morning. She opened her eyes to the familiar buzz of her phone on the bedside table. Her mind was still foggy with sleep, but as she reached for it, she saw the time, 7:30 a.m. The usual routine beckoned. She was a woman of discipline, always up early, always prepared. The messages were waiting. Her inbox was flooded with work-related emails, but one subject line caught her eye immediately: urgent, account withdrawal denied. She froze for a moment, staring at the words. She had scheduled a withdrawal from her business account yesterday. The money was meant to fund a large-scale expansion of her company's next project, an investment worth millions. It was supposed to be a straightforward transaction, one she had handled hundreds of times before. Curiosity mixed with dread as she tapped open the message. The email, a simple notification from her bank, confirmed what she already feared: withdrawal denied. That was it. No explanation, no further details. Just the chilling words that made her stomach churn. Denied, she muttered under her breath. How could this happen? She immediately opened the bank's mobile app, her fingers shaking with the kind of anxiety she hadn't felt in years. As the app loaded, her pulse quickened. When her account details finally appeared on the screen, she saw it, the pending transaction for the large sum she had requested. And next to it, a bold red notice: withdrawal denied. Nadia's heart sank. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience, this was a catastrophe. Her company was poised to make a massive leap forward, and the funds were essential. She couldn't afford any delays, especially not with the deal she was negotiating with the investors. Time was running out. Without wasting a second, Nadia tapped the customer service number and called. The phone rang once, twice, and then a calm, automated voice answered, asking her to choose from a series of options. She pressed the appropriate number for account inquiries, her frustration growing with each passing second. The line clicked, and an operator answered. Good morning, thank you for calling Global Bank. How can I assist you today? I'm Nadia Al-Karim, CEO of Al-Karim Tech, Nadia said, trying to keep her voice steady. I just received a notification that my account withdrawal has been denied. Can you explain why? The operator's tone was polite but distant. I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience, Ms. Al-Karim. Let me pull up your account details. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of keyboard keys tapping. After what seemed like an eternity, the operator spoke again. It appears your account has been flagged for suspicious activity, which is why the withdrawal was blocked. Unfortunately, I am unable to provide further information over the phone. Nadia's blood ran cold. Suspicious activity? This was impossible. She had always kept her accounts in order. She ran everything by the book, no shortcuts, no gray areas. Her company's financials were spotless. She had no debts, no scandals, and certainly no reason to be flagged by the bank. This doesn't make any sense, she said, her voice shaking now. I've been with your bank for over 10 years. My accounts are in good standing. There must be a mistake. I understand your frustration, Ms. Al-Karim, the operator replied smoothly, though there was no real empathy in her voice. But I'm afraid you will need to visit a branch in person to resolve this. Only then will we be able to give you more details. I don't have time for this, Nadia snapped, barely containing her rage. This is urgent. I need that money now. Do you know what's at stake? The operator remained calm. Again, I apologize, but the policy is clear. You'll need to come to a branch to resolve the issue. We cannot proceed with further action until that happens. Nadia hung up, the phone slipping from her fingers as her mind raced. She couldn't just drop everything and go to a branch. The deal with the investors was too critical, and she had a packed schedule today. But she also knew one thing: she couldn't let this slide. Not when so much was on the line. She grabbed her blazer and hurriedly dialed her assistant, Sarah. "I need you to reschedule my meetings for the next 2 hours. I'm heading to the bank now. There's something I need to sort out." Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, confusion evident in her tone. "What's going on, Nadia? Is everything okay?" "I don't know yet," Nadia replied, her tone tight. "But the bank just denied a major withdrawal. I have to go in person and find out why." Before Sarah could respond, Nadia hung up and grabbed her keys. The weight of the situation bore down on her as she rushed out of her apartment. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a simple glitch in the system. She had worked too hard to get here, to build her empire, and no one, not even a bank, was going to derail her now. The drive to the bank felt like an eternity. The traffic was unbearable, and Nadia's mind spun with possibilities. She couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that someone powerful, was behind this. But who? And why? Had someone at the bank deliberately targeted her, or was this some sort of bureaucratic error? She needed answers, and fast. When she finally arrived at the bank, she was met with the sterile, indifferent environment she had come to expect from financial institutions. The marble floors, the polished wood counters, it all felt so cold. She walked straight to the counter, where a young woman behind the desk greeted her with a professional but distant smile. "How can I assist you today, Ms. Al-Karim?" the woman asked, her voice pleasant but lacking warmth. "I'm here to inquire about an account withdrawal that was denied," Nadia said, trying to keep her frustration in check. "I need to know why it was blocked. Immediately." The woman's smile faltered just slightly, and she nodded. "I'll need to check your account details, Ms. Al-Karim. Please take a seat while I pull up the information." Nadia barely took a seat before the woman returned, her face slightly more serious now. "It appears that your account has been flagged for suspicious activity. This is why the transaction was blocked." "Suspicious activity?" Nadia's voice was sharp. "What are you talking about? My account is perfectly clean. There is nothing suspicious about it." The woman paused, clearly hesitant. "I'm afraid I don't have the specifics, Ms. Al-Karim. However, I can escalate this to our higher security team if you wish. They'll be able to provide further details." Higher security? Nadia's stomach turned. This was getting more bizarre by the minute. Someone was clearly trying to keep her from accessing her funds. But why? Was this some kind of scam, or was there something more sinister at play? And why was it happening now, when everything was supposed to be falling into place? She nodded curtly. "Do that. I'm not leaving until I get answers." Hours passed, and Nadia sat in the waiting area, her frustration turning to anxiety. She had no idea what was going on, but she knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary mistake. Someone was blocking her for a reason, and she was going to find out why, no matter what it took. As the minutes stretched into hours, Nadia's mind raced through every possibility. What if this was a test? A challenge thrown at her to see how far she would go? Or perhaps it was something more personal, something aimed directly at her. She had made her fair share of enemies over the years, but no one had ever gone this far. The woman returned to the lobby, her face pale and tense. "Ms. Al-Karim, the security team will be able to speak with you now." Nadia stood up, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what was waiting for her behind those doors, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. The doors to the back office swung open, and Nadia stepped into the dimly lit room, her heart racing with every step. The room, filled with high-tech monitors and security personnel, was a world away from the glossy, customer-friendly atmosphere of the main floor. Here, the air was thick with tension, and every person in the room wore an expression of purpose. No one smiled. No one made small talk. This was serious. The security officer who had greeted her earlier led her to a seat in front of a massive desk where a man in a suit sat with a clipboard in hand. His glasses rested low on his nose as he looked up at her with a tired expression, as though this was another mundane task for him. "Ms. Al-Karim," he said in a monotone voice, "I'm glad you could make it in today. I'm Detective Harris, and I'm here to assist you with the situation." Nadia's eyes narrowed as she took a seat across from him. Detective Harris? She wasn't sure what to make of the title. Was this some sort of criminal investigation? The way the bank had treated her withdrawal made it feel like something out of a conspiracy thriller. And now a detective was involved. It was all too much. "Detective Harris, I need you to explain what's going on. I run a successful tech company. I've been a loyal customer of this bank for years, and now I'm being treated like a criminal. Why was my account flagged? Why was my withdrawal denied?" Nadia's voice was tight with frustration. Harris didn't answer right away. Instead, he flipped through his clipboard, scanning papers and tapping his pen impatiently. It felt like he was delaying something. Finally, he put the clipboard down and gave her a direct look. His eyes were cold, calculating, and there was something unsettling about them. "Ms. Al-Karim, we've been tracking your account activity for the last few months. We've flagged it because we've detected irregular transactions." Nadia felt her chest tighten. Irregular transactions? This was absurd. She had always kept her financial records impeccable. Every penny was accounted for, and her business dealings had been transparent. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I haven't made any irregular transactions." "What kind of transactions are you referring to?" Harris didn't answer immediately. Instead, he typed something into his computer, his fingers moving quickly over the keys. Then, the screen on the monitor flickered for a moment before he turned it toward her. On it was a detailed report of her account over the last several months. Nadia leaned forward, squinting at the screen. It looked like a regular transaction history, until she saw one particular line item. It was an international transfer, a large sum of money that had been sent to an account in a country she had never dealt with before. The details were vague, and the transaction had a red flag next to it. "What's this?" Nadia asked, pointing at the suspicious transaction. "I've never made a transfer to this account. I don't even know who this person is." Harris adjusted his glasses, his expression unchanging. "That's the problem, Ms. Al-Karim. We've traced the transfer to a shell company linked to a series of illegal activities. We believe your account may have been compromised or used for money laundering purposes." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Money laundering? Her mind raced, but she couldn't form coherent thoughts. Nadia had built her company from the ground up. She had made sure everything was above board. She had never been involved in anything even remotely shady. Money laundering? Nadia repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're accusing me of this? Are you insane?" Harris's gaze didn't waver. "We are not accusing you of anything, Ms. Al-Karim. We are simply following the leads as part of a routine investigation. However, the transfer to that account cannot be ignored." Nadia stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I don't care about your investigation. This is my money. I have worked hard for it. And I'll be damned if I let you tell me I'm involved in some illegal activity." "Please, sit down," Harris said, his tone still as calm and detached as ever. "I understand your frustration. But you need to realize that this isn't just about your withdrawal. We are dealing with a network of operations that may involve some of the biggest names in business. If you have unknowingly been caught in this web, it's in your best interest to cooperate." Nadia's mind was spinning. This was no longer about just a denied withdrawal. She was now being dragged into something much larger than herself. The thought that her money, and perhaps her company, could be tied to criminal activity was horrifying. It felt like the walls were closing in. "I don't believe this," she said, the words coming out more slowly now, as if the gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. "You're telling me that someone used my account for illegal transfers? How could that even happen?" "That's what we need to figure out," Harris said. "But it's clear that someone with access to your account has been manipulating transactions. We're trying to trace the source, but it will take time." Nadia clenched her fists. Time was something she didn't have. Every minute she sat here was another minute her business was at risk, another minute the investors were growing suspicious of her. She couldn't afford to wait. "I don't care about your investigation," she said, her voice steely now. "I want to know how I can clear my name. I want my withdrawal processed. I don't want to be involved in this mess any longer." Harris looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Ms. Al-Karim. I'll escalate this matter further. But I need you to understand that this is not going to be an easy process. You'll need to cooperate fully, and you may be required to answer questions from law enforcement." The words felt like ice, but Nadia refused to back down. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm. "But I want results. I want my money, and I want to know who is behind this." Harris stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "You'll be contacted by our team once we have more information. Until then, we'll temporarily suspend your account and hold all transactions." Nadia's stomach churned as she stood to leave. She had come here for answers, but all she had was more questions. Who was behind the transfer? And more importantly, who had access to her account to make such a transfer in the first place? As she left the bank, Nadia couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. The transfer had been made to a shell company, and that could only mean one thing: someone was using her account for money laundering, and they had done so with her knowledge or without it. But if she had been targeted, why? Who would want to use her account for such a purpose? And why was the bank not doing more to protect its customers? The more she thought about it, the more confused and frustrated she became. She had built her career through hard work and trust in herself, trust in her team, and trust in the financial institutions that had helped her along the way. Now, all of that seemed like it had been shattered in an instant. Someone had violated that trust, and Nadia wasn't going to let them get away with it. Later that night, as she sat alone in her office, the phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. It was the bank. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. Had they finally found something? Were they ready to process her withdrawal? She picked up the phone. "Nadia Al-Karim. Ms. Al-Karim, this is Detective Harris. We've made some progress on your case. We need you to come back to the bank. We've uncovered something you'll want to see." Her pulse quickened. "What is it?" "I can't discuss it over the phone," Harris said. "But it's important. Please come in as soon as possible." Nadia's grip tightened on the phone. "I'll be there in an hour." As she hung up the phone, Nadia's mind raced. What had they found? Was it related to the mysterious transfer? The suspicion that someone was orchestrating this from the shadows grew stronger with every passing second. Whoever was behind this was going to regret targeting her. Nadia sat in her car outside the bank, the headlights cutting through the foggy night. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure. The phone call from Detective Harris had only increased her unease. The cryptic message about "something you'll want to see" had done little to calm her nerves. If anything, it had deepened her anxiety. What had they found? Was it more of the same? Or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. She couldn't let herself spiral into paranoia. This was about her business, her reputation, her livelihood. She needed to stay focused. Stepping out of the car, she pulled her coat tighter around her. The cold wind bit at her face, but it did nothing to numb the growing sense of dread that gnawed at her. The bank loomed ahead, its glass exterior gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The building that had once been a symbol of security now felt like a fortress. She was no longer just a customer, she was part of something much bigger, something that she couldn't yet understand. As she walked toward the entrance, she felt the weight of the night pressing in on her. The glass doors slid open, and the quiet buzz of the security system hummed in the background. The lobby, normally bustling with activity during business hours, was eerily silent at this late hour. The few employees that remained appeared preoccupied with their own tasks, their eyes darting nervously as Nadia passed. The receptionist gave her a terse nod as she entered, and without a word, motioned for her to follow. They took the elevator up to the same secure floor where she had met Harris earlier. The air seemed heavier now, as if something was about to give way. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Nadia stepped into the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway. Detective Harris stood at the far end, his back to her as he spoke in low tones with another man, someone she had never seen before. This man was older, his hair peppered with gray, and he wore an expensive suit that didn't seem to fit the usual banking atmosphere. He exuded authority, and there was something about his demeanor that made Nadia instinctively uneasy. As she approached, Harris turned around, his face tight, his usual calmness replaced by something darker, more urgent. "Ms. Al-Karim," Harris said, nodding toward the older man. "This is Special Agent Davis from the FBI. We've been working together on this investigation." Nadia's heart skipped a beat. The FBI. This was escalating quickly. The presence of federal agents meant the stakes were much higher than she had realized. "Agent Davis," she said, trying to mask her shock with a firm handshake. "I don't understand. What's going on? Why is the FBI involved?" Agent Davis's gaze was piercing, his eyes scanning her with unsettling precision. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Al-Karim. I'm afraid the situation has become more complex than we initially anticipated." "Complex?" Nadia echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on? Is this about the transfer? The one that was flagged?" Harris stepped forward. "It's not just the transfer, Ms. Al-Karim. It's everything surrounding it. You see, what we thought was a simple case of a compromised account has turned out to something much larger. There's a pattern of illegal activity, and your account is at the center of it." Nadia's pulse quickened. "Illegal activity? What kind of activity are we talking about here?" Agent Davis motioned for her to follow him as he led her into a small conference room. The walls were lined with monitors, each displaying financial data, charts, and news reports. It looked like the war room of a high-stakes operation. Once inside, Davis closed the door behind them and gestured for Nadia to sit. Harris remained standing, his arms crossed in front of him. "Ms. Al-Karim, what we've uncovered is troubling," Davis began, his tone serious. "The transfer we flagged is just one piece of a much larger operation. The money from your account was funneled through several shell companies before it reached its final destination, a series of accounts linked to a notorious international criminal syndicate." Nadia's breath caught in her throat. A criminal syndicate? She tried to steady her racing heart, but it was no use. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I had no idea. I've never been involved in anything like this. Why would anyone target me?" Agent Davis exchanged a glance with Harris before answering. "That's what we need to figure out. The question isn't why someone targeted you, it's why they used your account specifically. You're a high-profile businesswoman with a successful tech company. It's possible you were chosen because of your clean reputation and your access to large sums of money." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was far from clear. Nadia had always been careful with her finances. She had surrounded herself with a trustworthy team, had always made sure that every transaction was above board. How could her account have been used in such a way without her knowing? "I've done everything right," she said, the frustration evident in her voice. I've never been involved in anything shady. I don't even know where to begin looking for answers. You're not alone in this, Harris said, his tone reassuring for the first time. We're going to help you, but we need your cooperation. We've already started to trace the money, but it's a complex network, and it's going to take time to unravel. Your role, whether you're aware of it or not, is central to this investigation. Nadia nodded, though she wasn't sure how much she could trust them. The FBI had never been involved in any of her previous business dealings, and now she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than she could have imagined. Where do we go from here? She asked, her voice steady but with an underlying note of desperation. First, we need you to stay available, Davis said. We'll need to conduct a full audit of your company's financials, your bank accounts, and your personal transactions. There may be more irregularities that we haven't uncovered yet. We also need you to recall any unusual contacts or communications you've had in the past few months. If anyone has approached you with offers that seem too good to be true, anything out of the ordinary, we need to know. Nadia thought back over the past few months. Nothing had stood out as suspicious. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how easy it would have been for someone to manipulate her without her noticing. She had been so focused on growing her business, on scaling her tech company, that she might have missed something important. I'll help however I can, she said, her voice resolute. But I need to know, what happens now? Is my name cleared? Can I get access to my account again? Agent Davis didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke. We're going to do everything we can to clear your name, Ms. Al-Karim. But right now, we need to focus on the bigger picture. There's a network of criminal activity tied to your account, and we can't let it continue. As the hours passed, Nadia's world seemed to shift beneath her feet. The investigation into her account had opened a can of worms, one that led down a path she wasn't prepared to walk. She had no idea who was pulling the strings or why her name was being dragged through this mess, but one thing was clear, someone had carefully orchestrated this situation, and they were willing to go to great lengths to cover their tracks. As she left the bank that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her every move was being scrutinized, and her one simple life had become a puzzle that needed to be solved, before it was too late. But one thing was certain, Nadia was not going to let them get away with it. She was going to fight to clear her name, and she would stop at nothing to find out who was behind this twisted conspiracy. Nadia's eyes flickered open, the faint glow of dawn creeping in through the curtains of her bedroom. She hadn't slept much, despite her body's desperate need for rest. The last few days had felt like a blur of meetings, phone calls, and sleepless nights, each one more stressful than the last. The FBI, her company's investigation, the looming threat to her reputation, it was all too much. She had tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back, relentless and suffocating. Who had set her up? Why was her name tied to an international criminal syndicate? What had started as an inconvenient, but solvable, mistake had now become something far darker, something that could unravel everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a message from Detective Harris. The tension in her chest tightened. She didn't know what to expect, but she couldn't ignore it. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the phone and unlocked it. Message from Harris. We need to meet. It's urgent. Nadia's stomach dropped. What could be so urgent? She had been hoping for a break in the case, something that would point her in the right direction. But this? This felt like a warning. She quickly typed a reply. Message to Harris. Where and when? The response came almost immediately. Message from Harris. Come to the office. We'll explain everything. Nadia didn't waste time. She threw on her clothes and grabbed her keys. The office was only a short drive away, but every minute felt like an eternity. She tried to keep her mind focused, but the questions swirling in her head only seemed to grow louder. What was she walking into? Was this the moment she would finally learn the truth? As she parked outside the office building, her hands were shaking. She took another deep breath, steeling herself for whatever news lay ahead. The building loomed in front of her, its glass windows reflecting the overcast sky. Inside, everything had once been sleek and polished. Now, it felt like a ghost town, the silence almost oppressive. Detective Harris was waiting for her at the elevator. His face was grim, and there was something in his eyes that told her this meeting wouldn't be like the others. "Ms. Al-Karim," he said, his voice low. "I wish we could talk under better circumstances." Nadia nodded, trying to keep her composure. "What's going on, Harris? You said it was urgent." Harris motioned for her to follow him. "We've uncovered something that changes everything. It's not just about your account anymore. There's more to this, and it's much bigger than we initially thought." The two of them stepped into a small conference room at the back of the building. The room was dark, the only light coming from the array of monitors on the walls. Agent Davis stood by one of the screens, his arms crossed, a look of deep concentration on his face. As soon as Nadia walked in, both men turned to face her. "Ms. Al-Karim," Agent Davis said, his voice heavy. "What we're about to show you isn't easy to hear, but you need to understand the gravity of the situation." Nadia's stomach twisted. "What is it?" Harris pulled up a video on one of the screens. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough. Nadia's breath caught in her throat as she saw herself on the screen. The video showed her walking into a restaurant weeks earlier, but there was something off about the scene. A man she didn't recognize was waiting for her at a corner table. She had met him once, briefly, but the memory was faint. The video showed their conversation, brief but intense. Nadia had no idea what they had discussed, but the way the man kept glancing around made her uneasy. "That's me," Nadia said, her voice shaky. "But I don't remember this." Agent Davis nodded. "We know. That's part of the problem. The man in the video is connected to a much larger network of criminal activity. We've traced his movements, and they all lead back to the same source, the syndicate that's using your account." Harris continued, his face hardening. "What's more troubling is that we've found evidence suggesting you've been under surveillance for months. That meeting you had at the restaurant? It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted you to meet with him." Nadia felt the blood drain from her face. "Surveillance? But why? Why me?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Agent Davis said. "We don't know yet who's behind all of this, but we suspect that your account was targeted because of your position. You're influential, well-connected, and you have access to large sums of money. Someone saw an opportunity to use that to their advantage." "Are you saying they set me up?" Nadia asked, her voice cracking with disbelief. Harris nodded gravely. "That's exactly what we think happened. Your account was compromised and used to funnel money through a network of shell companies. We found evidence that it wasn't just your bank account that was compromised. Someone gained access to your personal files, your private meetings, and even your contacts." Nadia's heart raced. She could feel the walls closing in around her. How had they gotten so close to her? Had anyone she knew been involved? "I don't understand," she said, trying to steady her voice. "How could this happen without my knowledge? I've always been careful with my business. I don't trust anyone easily." Agent Davis's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "You're not the only one this has happened to. We've discovered that several high-profile individuals have been targeted in the same way. Someone is pulling strings behind the scenes, using their victims as pawns. But the real question is, why you?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud, and Nadia found herself unable to answer it. Why her? She couldn't come up with a single reason. But one thing was clear, her life was no longer her own. She had been swept into something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Harris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. We believe that someone has been monitoring your every move. This goes beyond just financial fraud. There's a deeper conspiracy at play here, and your involvement is more than just a coincidence. We need to know if anyone has approached you recently, made you an offer, or acted strangely around you. Nadia thought back to the last few months. She remembered the strange phone calls, the odd emails, and the unfamiliar faces that had appeared in her professional circles. But none of it had seemed out of place at the time. Now, looking back, it all seemed like part of a well-orchestrated plan. There's one person, Nadia said slowly, her mind racing. A man named Karim. He's an investor I've met a few times. He's always had an odd way of speaking, like he was trying to convince me to take certain risks. But I thought nothing of it. Do you have any contact information for him? Agent Davis asked quickly. Nadia nodded and pulled out her phone. She opened her contacts list and handed it to him. His number is here. But I haven't spoken to him in weeks. He's always been a bit pushy. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Davis took the phone from her and began typing quickly. We'll look into it. If he's involved in this, we'll find out. But I need you to stay alert. Someone is watching you, and we need to figure out who before they make their next move. Nadia's mind was spinning. She had always prided herself on being vigilant, on trusting her instincts. But now, everything she had built seemed to be crumbling around her. She had been unknowingly walking into a trap, and now the only thing she could do was fight back. As the meeting ended, Nadia stepped out of the room, her mind whirling with new revelations. There was more to this than she could have ever imagined. And whoever was behind it was getting closer to her, piece by piece. The more she learned, the more questions seemed to arise. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going down without a fight. Nadia's mind buzzed as she sat in the back of the sleek black car, the world outside passing by in a blur. She was heading to her office for another tense meeting with the team and Detective Harris. The shadows from the trees along the road seemed to stretch unnaturally long, as if they were reaching for her, threatening to pull her back into the nightmare she was trying to escape. Everything had changed. The sense of control she had once felt was gone. She had always been the one calling the shots, making decisions with ease, moving through life with purpose. But now, she was caught in a web of lies and deceit, and she had no idea who to trust. The people she had known for years, the friends, the colleagues, even the business partners, could any of them be involved in this? Or worse, could any of them be orchestrating it? The memories of the previous night's conversation with Detective Harris and Agent Davis haunted her thoughts. The truth was slipping through her fingers like sand, and every new piece of information seemed to raise more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clearer with each passing hour: whoever was behind this was patient, methodical, and ruthless. The car slowed to a stop, and Nadia's heart skipped a beat. They had arrived at the office. She stepped out of the vehicle, her high heels clicking against the pavement. The building loomed ahead of her, its towering glass structure reflecting the dull gray sky. It was the same building where she had worked tirelessly for years, building an empire from the ground up. But now, it felt like a prison, and she was its captive. Inside, everything was quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights above her head seemed deafening in the silence. Nadia's footsteps echoed as she walked toward the conference room where Harris and the team were already waiting. She opened the door and stepped inside, trying to steady her breath, but her pulse was racing. The faces in the room were grim, the weight of the situation pressing down on everyone. Harris stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed, his brow furrowed in concentration. Agent Davis was seated next to him, his laptop open in front of him, his fingers flying across the keys as he typed furiously. Nadia took her seat at the table, her mind still racing. "What's the latest?" she asked, trying to mask the unease in her voice. Harris exchanged a glance with Davis before speaking. "We've been digging into your contact list, and we found something that doesn't add up. The man you mentioned, Karim, he's not just a businessman. He's been linked to a series of suspicious transactions, and we believe he may have been using you to launder money. Nadia's stomach lurched. She had known something was off about him, but this? This was more than she could have ever anticipated. Are you saying that Karim was using me? Davis nodded. We have evidence that suggests you were unknowingly involved in multiple financial schemes. Karim wasn't just an investor, he's part of a larger network that's been operating under the radar. And you've been a key player in it, though it seems you didn't realize it until now. Nadia's thoughts spun as she tried to process the information. Karim, the man who had always been so charming and persuasive, had been manipulating her all along. But why? Why target her? There were so many unanswered questions, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear: this wasn't a simple case of financial fraud. It was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. We've traced the money, Harris continued. It's been funneled through several accounts linked to shell companies. And here's where it gets interesting. One of those accounts is linked to a high-ranking official in the government. We believe this is part of a larger conspiracy, one that involves some very powerful people. Nadia's breath caught in her throat. A government official? The implications of that were staggering. She had always known that corruption existed at high levels, but to be caught up in something so deep? It was beyond her comprehension. Davis added, we're still working on uncovering the full extent of the network. But what we do know is that the people behind this operation are skilled, and they have connections that go all the way to the top. Nadia's mind raced. Who could she trust? She had always prided herself on her instincts, but now, she didn't know who to believe. Every face around her could be hiding a secret, and every word could be a lie. We need to move quickly, Harris said, breaking her train of thought. If they realize we're onto them, they'll try to cover their tracks. We can't let that happen. Nadia nodded, her determination resurfacing. She couldn't afford to be passive anymore. This wasn't just her reputation at stake. This was about exposing a network of corruption that could bring down powerful people, and she would stop at nothing to make sure the truth came to light. What's our next step? Nadia asked, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. We're going to need your help, Harris said. We've been monitoring Karim's movements, but we believe he's planning something. We need you to get close to him again, figure out what he's up to, and gather as much information as you can. Nadia's pulse quickened. You want me to meet with him again? We don't have a choice, Davis replied. The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks. We need you to act as if nothing's changed. Keep up appearances. Don't let him know we're onto him. Nadia swallowed hard. She didn't want to go back into that world, to face the man who had manipulated her. But she knew there was no other option. The stakes were higher than ever. Her life, her career, everything, was hanging in the balance. I'll do it, Nadia said, her voice unwavering. But we need to be careful. I can't let him suspect anything. Harris and Davis exchanged a look. We'll support you every step of the way, Harris said. But you need to keep your guard up. These people are dangerous. They will stop at nothing to protect themselves. Nadia nodded, her resolve hardening. She couldn't afford to be scared anymore. She had been thrust into this battle whether she liked it or not. And now, she would fight with everything she had. As the meeting wrapped up, Nadia stepped out of the room, her mind focused on the task ahead. She had a role to play, and she would play it to perfection. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The deeper she got into this, the more she realized how much was at stake. One misstep, and everything could come crashing down. As she left the office building, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from an unknown number. Message. You're getting too close, Nadia. We've been watching you. Back off, or you won't like the consequences. Nadia's heart skipped a beat. They knew. Whoever was behind this knew she was on to them. The web was tightening around her, and there was no turning back now. The evening sky was an unyielding canvas of dark blue, casting long shadows over the quiet city streets. Nadia's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she walked toward the meeting room, the tension from the past few days settling in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. Each day, the danger seemed to escalate, each step she took brought her closer to the heart of the conspiracy she'd uncovered. The feeling that she was being watched had become inescapable, a constant presence lurking just out of sight. She had become paranoid, unsure of who she could trust. Every corner she turned felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. Her phone had buzzed with an ominous message earlier, someone was threatening her. They knew what she was doing. And worse, they were willing to do anything to stop her. Nadia's instincts told her to be cautious, but she had no choice now. The web she was caught in was unraveling, and she could see the truth within it, but it was like trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle in the dark. There was something much bigger at play, something far beyond her initial understanding of what this conspiracy was about. Nadia entered the room and was immediately greeted by the concerned faces of Detective Harris and Agent Davis. They had been working relentlessly, each of them poring over new leads, cross-referencing information, hoping to uncover something that would finally bring the perpetrators to justice. Nadia took her seat across from them, her gaze sharp, but her mind still swirling with the weight of the message. She hadn't shared the threat with them yet. She wasn't sure if she could trust them completely. No one could be fully trusted in this game. "Anything new?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge of anxiety beneath the calm. Harris exchanged a glance with Davis before speaking. "We've been looking into the latest lead. It's connected to a high-profile individual, a business mogul who has a history of shady deals, but there's more. We think he's the one who's been pulling the strings behind this whole operation." Nadia raised an eyebrow. "A business mogul?" Davis nodded. "He's tied to the highest levels of finance and has connections with politicians, law enforcement, you name it. But there's something off about him. He's been laying low recently, and we can't find much on him." Nadia's thoughts churned. The pieces were slowly coming together. She had always suspected that someone powerful was behind the scenes, but this was bigger than she could have ever imagined. A business mogul with connections to government officials. It was like something out of a movie, but this was her life, and it was real. "How are we going to approach him?" Nadia asked, her voice sharp. "We're working on getting a lead on his whereabouts," Harris replied. "But here's the thing, we believe you may be able to get close to him. You've already established a relationship with Kareem, and we know he has ties to this mogul. If we can leverage that connection, we might be able to get to the heart of the operation." Nadia felt a shiver run down her spine. It was risky. But then again, everything she had done so far had been a gamble. She had come too far to back down now. "I'll do it," she said, without hesitation. Davis leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You need to be careful. These people don't hesitate to eliminate threats. You're already in their crosshairs, Nadia. The last thing we want is for them to get to you before we can make a move." Nadia nodded, but inside, she was already running scenarios in her mind. She had to stay one step ahead. There was no room for mistakes. The stakes were higher than ever, and she could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. As they discussed the details of the next steps, Nadia's phone buzzed again. She glanced down and saw another message from the unknown number. Message. "You're too close. Stay out of this or face the consequences. You won't get away." Her pulse quickened. The threat was clear. They were watching her, and they would do whatever it took to stop her from uncovering the truth. She pocketed the phone and looked back at Harris and Davis. "I'll take the risk. Let's do it." That evening, Nadia found herself back in the shadows, preparing for her next meeting with Kareem. The stakes had never been higher. She had to keep her cool and pretend like nothing was wrong. She couldn't let him see that she knew what he was up to. Every word she spoke, every move she made, had to be calculated. As the hours passed, Nadia found herself growing more and more anxious. She hadn't seen Karim for days, but now she was about to face him again. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a confrontation. And this time, she was no longer the prey. She was the hunter. When the time came, she entered the upscale restaurant where they had agreed to meet. The dim lighting and quiet atmosphere did nothing to calm her nerves. Karim was already seated at a table in the back, his back to her, his posture relaxed, but there was something in his presence that made her spine tingle. He knew she was coming. He had to. She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the floor. As she approached, he turned and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was cold, calculated. "Nadia," he said smoothly. "It's good to see you again." She sat across from him, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral. "Karim. We need to talk." He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "Talk? About what, exactly?" Nadia didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know what you're involved in. I know about the money laundering, the connections you have, and the people behind it." For a moment, Karim said nothing. His gaze locked onto hers, his expression unreadable. But Nadia could see the flicker of something in his eyes, something dark, something dangerous. "You're playing a very dangerous game, Nadia," he said, his voice low and steady. "You don't know what you're messing with." "I think I do," Nadia replied, her voice firm. "And I'm not backing down." Karim's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "You don't have a choice. You've already crossed a line, and now there's no turning back." Nadia's heart pounded in her chest. The threat was real. She could feel it in the air, like a storm that was about to break. But she couldn't back down now. She couldn't let him intimidate her. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice cold. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Karim leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You should be," he said quietly. "You have no idea what's at stake here. But you will soon enough." Before Nadia could respond, there was a sudden noise from across the room. It was faint, but Nadia's sharp instincts picked up on it immediately. Someone was watching them. She glanced over her shoulder, but there was no one there. Just shadows. Her breath hitched in her chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Karim's gaze followed hers, and for a brief moment, he seemed concerned. But the look was gone before she could be sure. He smiled again, but it wasn't friendly. It was cold, and it sent a chill down her spine. "You should leave now," he said, standing up abruptly. "You've already pushed too far." Before Nadia could protest, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of patrons. Nadia sat there for a long moment, trying to steady her breath, but the warning was clear. She was in over her head.